Okay, well, really the question is going to be to Max, Dave, and Allie. And I would ask Anna this question too. If Anna can hear and wants to participate, please join us. So back in the June of 2012, 8 of us made a bunch of videos. We all took our positions. We were all young. I was even young. And how has it changed? I'd love for the 3 of you, and maybe Anna too, just to say, use an instance from week 5 to say how your views have changed over the 9 years that we've been doing this and talking about these poems. What a weird question. And I'd love for John Knight to comment on the responses if he would be willing. Okay, Max McKenna, you first.
This is a great question, Al. I think when we first did this week together, I held on to the idea that a certain amount of formal familiarity or clarity would be essential to the politics of these poems insofar as that it would help circulate the political message. That I thought this sort of a kind of recognizable form would help in that, the way that like a broadside or a slogan painted on the side of a wall would accomplish something similar.
So for instance, Max, McKay's sonnet, arguing the very radical position for counterviolence, you felt could get out there because it was a sonnet and be appreciated by a lot of people who would dismiss a free verse rant.
Exactly. In part because at the time, publishers might have been more receptive to a sonnet, for example,
I mean, to say
regardless of the content. So maybe, you know, you'd be able to get that message across. I think though, in the last 10 years, I'm not so sure of that idea anymore. In part because I'm very interested in the gulf that exists between raising awareness and actually changing or structurally affecting society. So I'm not sure that raising awareness in this kind of discursive way is as effective as perhaps I thought it was 10 years ago. I think that it serves a purpose, but I'm not sure that formal familiarity or clarity is going to do what I thought it would do. That there's maybe something, there's more to be said about, or there's something to be said about demanding perhaps a bit of more of an open form from poems that would want to be political in this contemporary moment.
So well said, Max. I'm going to turn to Dave Poplar in a second. I just want to add, folks.
Let's see.
I'm not sure what's happening there. Max, we added, we put Amiri Baraka's poem Incident in week 6 so that we could reflect on how we dealt with Cullen's incident in week 5. And Baraka, I think, does a brilliant job of using an open forum to challenge, for instance, the racist/anti-racist binarism of the Cullen poem, which is very powerful. But Baraka is saying, in effect, with all due respect to the Cullen poem, it's really complicated, and it's so complicated that I'm going to mix up the pronouns so that you really have to work to figure out where the violence is coming from, who gives the violence, who receives the violence. So that's a good example of how we are led by Cullen to think one way. Anyway, thank you. That was great. Dave Poplar, has there been a change in 9-10 years?
It has been 10 years, because when I took English 88, I printed out all these poems. And if you could see, this is printed from 10 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
So, I still have my printouts.
You kept your notes.
Yeah, I'm a sentimentalist. So,
I know that.
Yeah, I don't feel as if I ever formed any real hard and fast attitudes. I feel like my understanding has continually deepened, but I haven't made any 180s or had any dramatic epiphanies, but it has been just incredibly deeper levels of understanding of each poem, of what form does, of how form is being used. So I can't really answer the question. It's like I haven't had any.
But you reflected, and that's what we asked for. Allie Castleman, how has your view changed in 9 or 10 years?
I like just using the example of Dave's 10-year-old piece of paper, what I imagine that to be, because maybe that exists as it was, like as a maintained document, but you can also imagine like some of us having that document that we've written on every single year in like every single discussion we've had about the poem. And then you have like a literal palimpsest of different like views and different voices coming in. And so I think like on one level, it's hard for me to remember what I thought. It's always kind of hard to go back, which almost brings to mind the Charles Bernstein poem in week 9, I think.
Week 8. Yeah, week 8.
8. But the just have it, I think, you know, the conversation that we had just now on Yet Do I Marvel is a really good example of just kind of like spontaneously someone will say something that shifts the way many people have been thinking about a poem, and then you never let go of that kind of pivot or just new like shade coloring the poem in your mind. So yeah, I think it's kind of impossible to separate all of the layers and all of the kind of deepening that kind of Dave was talking about, just by being influenced by many, many people over 10 years in community.
John Knight, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay. John.
My thought of my change. Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, I just recently reread Wilbur's poem about the death of a toad.
Yeah.
That we think of as being, that you all thought of as being humorous. And it, to me, and I just reread it and thought about it, it's a very pure example of sublimation. He had the PTSD and the death of the toad that he killed with a motor machine reminded him of the death of a friend of his in combat. And so it's just the powerful use of this poetry is just amazing.